US President Donald Trump has joined with political leaders from around the world to attend the funeral of Pope Francis. Joining me live is electoral analyst and political consultant Aidan Smith. Aidan, good morning our time to you. One of the most pivotal moments from a US perspective and world peace perspective was the meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky on the sidelines of the funeral of the Pope.
Yeah, and it's all kind of interesting, harkening back to even a year or two ago when there were calls for the Pope, obviously someone with nearly unparalleled international stature and respect, to mediate the conflict. And when you look at it now today, the Trump-Zelensky meeting, and even when you think of the Ukraine war, even as it's as intense as ever and so many Ukrainian civilians are getting killed, has obviously receded a lot from the headlines. There was kind of an interesting turn when you did have the meeting with Zelensky in February, which was obviously a really infamous event, including the Vance remark about, accusing Ukraine of being insufficiently thankful. Right now, looks like this is a more cordial meeting. At least that's what's publicly reported. But you do see a lot of alarm from European allies surrounding this, not just the meeting itself, but remarks from both Trump and Vance that really seem like they're want to be pushing Ukraine to accept a quote unquote peace deal that would amount to a massive reduction in surrender of territory to Russian occupiers.
It would be quite an irony, wouldn't it, at the funeral of a pope that had this very high on his agenda, peace, that something could come out of this meeting.
For sure. And this is something where this is kind of a broader comment, but when I was looking at, and I wanted to just assess public opinion on Ukraine, what's interesting is that in America, even though a lot of discourse around Ukraine has been monopolized by the right in the last few years, you don't see that many people publicly on the liberal side talk about it and as defensive and forceful a force as, you see a lot of right-wingers really among people who are more favorable to isolationism and reducing U.S. aid to Ukraine. You see them monopolize a lot of public discourse, but polling from Gallup and NBC show that since Trump's been back in office, there's been a pretty staggering uptick in support for Ukraine aid. But the second factor in that is, ironically, despite this, foreign policy is, I think, actually at some level less salient than it was under Biden, where you had that such a dominant topic of every day. Now when Americans are more focused on getting hit as consumers amid tariffs, amid economic frustrations and, all that stuff, it might actually
just one second, Aidan. We're seeing some vision here. So we're seeing some vision here of Trump and Putin, now Trump and Zelensky. And it was interesting because we just played we quoted a few things that Donald Trump has said on social media post the funeral. And he even intimated in there that he goes, I think Putin could be playing with me, in his own words. That's something that a lot of people are thinking, aren't they, around the world. Steve Witkoff met with Putin for a fourth time.
No, it's absolutely true. And I think that's one of the things about Trump and just both in his first and second term, where in so many of his one-time alliances, thinking with even member of his own cabinet, Jeff Sessions, the attorney general first term, one of his closest allies at first, who he had a falling out with. We've seen that pattern so many times over, or you've seen the opposite with the Kim Jong-un instance of him actually becoming increasingly friendly with him over time. Since 2016, Putin and Trump's relationship has been completely very controversial and for good reason. But I've always thought there's always been kind of an underestimated possibility that the eventual outcome would be a falling out between the two. And it's just really unpredictable when it comes to both Trump on a personal level and White House policy. But as it stands, I do think that both Trump and Vance are pretty committed to pressuring Ukrainian and European allies to support a peace deal where Ukraine's territory, especially Crimea, which seems like they're really honing in on, would be given to Russia. So there's still a lot of alarm among allies right now.
On the subject of pressure and looking more domestically at the US, what do you think is going to happen to Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, the controversial pick, the captain's pick?
When it comes to Hegseth, I think that's one where even a lot of people in MAGA world you see, since it has such salience publicly, you see people tweet in favor of him or go on talk shows to defend him. But the tea leaves, when people are looking at it closely, it looks like Hegseth just has increasingly fewer allies. There's plenty of times when people will want to stick their heads out to support someone who is very ideologically similar to them. And if they're someone who's getting a lot of flack for their beliefs, people will go and stick their head out for them. But Hegseth isn't really that case. He's not someone getting attacked for being too conservative, too MAGA flavored. He's someone who's getting a lot of heat from all sides of the aisle right now because of his own personal conduct and controversies surrounding him personally. And because of that, it's just going to see a situation where fewer and fewer people are incentivized to actually stick their head.
Do you think he'll go, Aidan? Aidan, do you think he'll go?
I think that it's fairly likely he'll go by the end of the year. I think that things could easily cool down. And when we're in a news cycle where stories rarely dominate coverage for more than a few days at the time, the idea of a defense secretary leaving after 3 months in the first 100 days, that would look embarrassing. But I think it's very possible that he's out by the end of 2025, I think.
They are interesting days. Thank you, Aidan. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.